this, I think, is a perfect time for, now that we're kind of all stuck at home, it's the perfect time for tooling up, I feel, it's called sharpening the saw.
You're about to enter the Akyan Podcast. India's first and very own architecture podcast, where you'll hear the insights, experiences, and journeys from India's leading architects. No matter what your skill level is, together we'll build on our knowledge and share architecture's greatest stories ever told. Now, here's your host, Manish Paul Simon.
Hey guys, welcome back to yet another episode of the Akyan Podcast. Today we have with us Takbir Fatima, who is one of the first guests on our show. So it's an absolute treat to have her back on the show. If you haven't heard the first episode with Takbir, head to akyan.com/05. She shares her journey in architecture, doing the DRL program at the Architectural Association London, how she founded Design-Aware, which is right now an amazing firm doing so many awesome initiatives, and more. So head to akyan.com/05 for the first episode with Takbir. Now in this episode, we're going to be discussing about the COVID pandemic and how that's affected us architects, how Takbir started various awesome initiatives like Studio to Site, Fractals Workshop, Buildaware, Design-Aware House, and the importance of not just being a regular architecture firm, but also being innovative and being more of an entrepreneurial architectural firm. You'll get to listen to what exactly those initiatives are and how you too can start something innovative. We talk more about the positive impacts of working from home, how you can make the best use of this time and upskill yourselves by using the various resources online. And we're also going to be talking about the various programs or tools that you could use as a firm owner to better manage your firm virtually and also run things smoothly. And towards the end, we talk about this recent ruling by the Supreme Court of India stating that unregistered individuals are not prohibited from the practice of architecture, provided that they don't designate themselves as architects. This is definitely a ridiculous ruling demeaning ourselves as architects. And we're going to be talking about how it's going to impact us as registered architects. So there's a lot of useful information in this episode which Takbir shares, and it's very relevant to what's happening right now. So please do share it with everyone related to our field. There's also an awesome initiative started by Design-Aware called the Road Less Travel series. I'm going to be part of this series and I will be giving a masterclass on how you can get into podcasting. Today is the last date to register for the event. It's an online event and it will be conducted over Zoom. It starts on the 6th and goes on till the 14th. There's going to be 9 speakers, including myself. And we're going to be talking about the various parts that we've undertaken, which is not just being a traditional architect. So I would definitely recommend you guys to check it out and do support the initiative, since all the funds that are collected will be contributed towards helping the backbone of our industry, who are the migrant laborers, and they've been impacted the most by this national lockdown and the COVID pandemic. So if you want to register, head to akyan.com/designaware or head to our show notes and you'll find the registration link. Please do check it out and please do support this awesome initiative. With that said, this is The Role of an Architect with Takbir Fatima. Let's go. Hey guys, welcome back to the Akyan Podcast. Today we have with us a very special guest who was one of the first guests on the podcast. So it's an absolute pleasure to have her on our show again. Hi Takbir, welcome back.
Hi Manish. Thanks for having me on the show again. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for coming on and taking your time. These are like interesting times we live in. No one expected that something like this would happen, and we're suddenly in the midst of a pandemic. How have you adapted to this time, and like how has it affected you as a practicing architect and a firm owner?
Yeah, I think this is the first time at least in our lifetimes, that something so big is impacting the entire world. The whole world is going through the same thing at once.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is very, very rare. So I think everybody is kind of panicking or it's kind of negative, but as we began to realize that even though it came quite late to India, we began to realize that the situation is getting more serious and it's going to get more serious. We started working from home. So it's been about 10 days or more that we've been working from home. But I think as a firm or as an architect, I think thankfully the lockdown hasn't really affected us that much as other sectors or other individuals, because one thing is that we transitioned into it early on, but we actually already had systems in place that allow us to work remotely, because we've been working remotely on and off for a very long time now. So since the very beginning, we started as a virtual studio of sorts. And also I travel a lot for work and to teach workshops. So part of the year I might be working remotely from different locations. So we regularly use Skype to communicate, and when we're not in the same place, but even when we are in the same physical space in the studio, we use the cloud. We use for file transfers, and there's also one tool that we use that's heavily used in our studio, which is Asana. That's a kind of platform where you can, it's a project management or task management software, and it allows you to, it allows me to assign tasks to different people in the team. It allows them to see what's happening on that task or on that project. It's a nice visual kind of arrangement where you can kind of have different stages outlined. You can have a Gantt chart which shows progress of work, and you can share files, you can track progress, and you can chat or make comments on the work that's going on. So we use that. We've been using it for years. We've tried many different alternatives, and Asana is the one that we like the best. It has a nice interface.
And what's a Gantt chart?
A Gantt chart is something that actually allows you to track your it's a project management tool, which allows you to track progress. So on one side, maybe I can share a link to it, which listeners can kind of get an idea of what that is. So on the left side, you have a list of tasks, and on the right side, you have the timeline. So you can actually plot visually, graphically, you can plot how the timeline is going. So we use that for project management of many of our projects. So I think this is a tool, even though we are in the studio, we use the same tool. So it hasn't really affected us as such, So a lot of my time goes in organizing work and working on the firm. So that kind of is now being transferred to doing it from home. So So I think this kind of, there are, as a director of the firm, or even for solo practitioners, or even for students, I think this works. If you have different seasons in which which have different themes. So you do different types of work at different points of the year. When there's a lull, you can try, doing something else. So this, I think, is a perfect time for, now that we're kind of all stuck at home, it's the perfect time for tooling up, I feel, it's called sharpening the saw, where this should actually be there in your routine or in your part of your year throughout the year. But now I think is a particularly good time where you can, learn some things or do certain projects which you had been putting on hold or which you didn't have the time to do earlier. So it's a time to maybe read and learn and improve your skill set.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of firms complain that their employees are not skilled enough and they are not efficient enough. But I think if they use the right resources like LinkedIn Learning or Udemy, I'm sure they could definitely upskill themselves.
Yeah, there are so many options nowadays. You don't have to go to a center or an institute and learn from there. You can learn remotely online. You can learn individually through pre-recorded sessions. I think there are we have so many options on hand these days. So it's the ideal time to sharpen the saw right now. And apart from that, I think there should be different times or different kind of, you're almost like you're zoning out your time. So you can sometimes work on design, sometimes you're working on learning, or sometimes competitions or writing or something. And in my case, that's what I do when I get time. And then there should be long-term goals and short-term goals, which are overlapped in different ways. So it's important to diversify your time. And Marie Forleo calls it being a multi-passionate entrepreneur. So I'm actually reading her book right now, which is Everything is Figure Outable, which is, a really nice book to, I think, just like a manual of how to run your business or even your life.
So you follow a lot of life coaches, is it?
I think business coach is what you could call her.
Okay.
It's more of a Marie Forleo and I think Michael Hyatt. Those are my two favorite ones that I like. Gary Vaynerchuk as well.
Oh, awesome.
If you need an ass whooping.
All right. Yeah, even I follow him as well. I think like the idea of having different seasons, different themes is brilliant. And I'm sure like if a lot of architects think, they do think out of the box, but they should think even beyond that and like be more entrepreneurial just like you. So thanks for sharing all those great tips. So moving on, like I've been following a lot of your work online and especially the various ventures that you've started, like Studio to Site, Fractals Workshop. You have something called Designer House. How do you come up? And it's very important to not just stay as a traditional practice, but to go beyond. But how do you come up with such great initiatives and always being more entrepreneurial than just an architect?
Mm-hmm. I definitely, I think it's not just an architect. I think architecture encompasses all of these things under it, right?
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
such a vast field. So what we've been taught, and wrongly, is that there is this thing I call the single solution syndrome, where only one single path is correct and every other thing is a deviation from that. But I think it's more about many different paths and many different options being equally relevant at once. So I think right from the beginning as students, we should be given different options that, you can go in this direction where you're an architect who designs buildings, or you can design something else, or you can, maybe get into a related field. So it's not necessary, or you could be an entrepreneur. And I see what's really heartening nowadays is I see a lot of students who, I've seen students who have approached me and they say that they're already entrepreneurs while they're studying. So that's really positive. That was not the case before. And I think everybody needs to do that. So from the very beginning, when we, started our firm, we've always believed in open source sharing of our work. So we share all our design process, in fact, on our website, on our social media, and we have a lot of interactive sessions on social media as well with live videos. Nice. And when there's some work going on in the studio, we have live videos, and kind of even during workshops, every workshop that I teach, there are live videos of work that's going on. So a lot of people, in fact, many people around the world that we happen to meet, they're already familiar with our studio and our projects without ever having visited us or being in touch with us, which it used to surprise us before.
Awesome.
Now it's become kind of the norm. So we also like to collaborate with different professionals, and we like to work across different disciplines. So the Fractals workshop actually began as a generative design workshop. And now it's kind of become an umbrella under which we have different educational initiatives.
Nice.
So the next series in the design workshop series is in collaboration with 1:X. And we'll have workshops in different cities, which are organized by them in India.
Okay.
But the workshop has also been to many different cities in the Middle East. We were recently collaborating, and we were in talks with an organization in China, which is now unfortunately put on hold. So under this Fractals Workshop banner, we have many different educational initiatives now. And Studio to Site is kind of one part of that we recently started. So just to give you a little background.
Yeah, sure.
I think this is something we can all relate to when we were students. So when I was a student and just after graduating for maybe a couple of years after graduating when I was working in different firms, I felt a major disconnect between the studio and the site. So where we lack site exposure immediately, some people are probably fortunate enough that they get to go on site immediately, but a lot of us lack the site experience and exposure. And it might even take years for a solo practitioner, a young architect to see their designs being built.
Yeah.
So I really think that schools need to incorporate site visits as a regular thing in the curriculum, where students go on site or they're taken on site and they get comfortable with the site atmosphere. They learn about the construction process. They meet and interact with engineers, as well as, of course, site supervisors and construction workers on site. And they should get to know what is the role of an architect on site. So it's not just in the studio. An architect has a significant role on site as well.
Yeah.
So, and then they will also see challenges that are happening on site at that moment and how people are dealing with them. So this is a crucial part of being an architect, and I feel it's very much neglected, whether it's in schools or, in early practice. So when I actually realized the significance of this was the very first project in which we were deeply involved with the construction process. That was the Hilltop School in Golconda, which is a very challenging project that, in terms of design as well as construction, but because it was on a cliff with all this sheetrock and a very difficult terrain. So, and also the budget was very tight. So that project really gave us insight into, site experience. And I was very much involved on site throughout the project. It still am, because it's a charity school. So it's still being, expanded as they raise funds. So in that, we were playing very different roles of architect, designer, fundraiser, engineer, construction management. So that's when I realized the importance of getting my hands dirty. So I had to get on site and learn by doing without really having that much of knowledge and experience from before. And because there were a lot of issues on site, we had to do damage controls, we had to fix mistakes and errors and give solutions. So a lot of design decisions were made directly on site, and it became like a design construction feedback loop. So that's when I realized that it's very important. It's the experience of the site. On the other hand, we also have many clients who approach us for complete design and build solutions.
Oh, nice.
So what we're doing now
projects.
What we're doing is we're taking up design as well as project management of the construction process. And I think project management is something that is very much, it's not given its due. Because it's quite an important aspect of the construction process, where you need somebody who is very, in a very kind of structured and organized manner is managing the entire process. That is something that we've now gotten into in the construction process. So we call this initiative Buildaware. And so we have taken up, we take up selected projects for design and build. So now that we have quite a few live sites, which are at different stages of construction, I decided that, okay, let's open up these sites to the students of architecture, design, engineering, or anyone who's in a related field, as well as young professionals who would like to gain exposure of the construction process. We are now opening up our sites and sharing this knowledge, I wish we had when we were students.
Absolutely.
So that's what the site, so that's what Studio to Site is all about. So, we would like to introduce different aspects of learning to other students, give them the opportunity to learn on site. And so the program itself is quite a long-term program. So you have to be kind of dedicated. It's a 12-month long program. And at the same time, it's not very intensive. So it's flexible enough to accommodate working professionals or students. We will be working around their schedule. The site work obviously is going on as it is. And then we come in every 2 weeks, we take them to the site, and then we will show them around and show them or teach them what's happening on site at that given point of time. So they learn at different sites. They'll be learning different stages of the construction process. Currently, this one is kind of put on hold because of the current situation, but yeah, we've done certain sessions online, which are design presentations, just to understand the design process behind, because it's studio to site. So the studio part, we're doing it remotely now. And then the site part, hopefully, will begin in the next month or so.
Awesome. Yeah, I wish like more architecture firms take up this initiative of bringing students to their site, and also getting the hands dirty, because you learn by doing, right? So I think it's a great initiative, and I hope more people adopt it in a way.
Yeah, I think it's very easy, right? I mean, it's so easy for architects to do that. They can just allow students to come and learn. I think it's a very, already there's sites which are on which construction is going in progress. So you might as well allow somebody to learn from that. And I think a lot of architects now, the traditional model is just it's on its way out. So every architect has approach or a different understanding of what it means to be an architect. And, everybody is now, I think everyone is working from home. So we've another initiative that we've come up with is that we're doing a lot of remote learning programs.
Right.
One in particular, because I'm talking about the out of the box kind of way of practicing architecture, the non-traditional way.
Yeah.
So we've reached out to many different architects who are, they're qualified architects, but they're practicing in different fields.
Right.
So many architects all over the world who would like to share their journey and kind of share how they started in architecture, but they took many different career paths. We have graphic designers, we have a furniture designer, we have also somebody who's gone into real estate, some into teaching, and some into journalism as well. So these are, and also we have somebody who works towards certifying green buildings. So these are the different professionals that we've approached. And in the coming weeks, every week or so, we'll have a different lecture, kind of like a lecture series or a masterclass by these different architects. And hopefully that'll open up, students or young professionals' minds as to what are the career opportunities that they have in front of them, rather than the same, one-track kind of traditional path that they're expected to follow.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it goes to show that architects these days don't stick to one path, but rather try out things and pick and choose which one works best for them, right?
Yeah, in fact, this podcast is an example of that. So I think you should also join us for that. So,
sure.
We would like to learn how you, started the podcast as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That I haven't shared that yet. Yeah, but it would be an interesting story.
Yeah.
All right. Like you said before, right? I mean, you were part of this virtual world way before this pandemic happened, and a lot of us architects are realizing now that, hey, there is more productivity if we let our employees work from home. So do you feel that when this crisis gets over and there'll be a lot more architecture firms transitioning to the virtual world, since you're already part of this realm?
I think when this whole thing is over, everybody will just run out onto the streets and they don't want to be at home anymore. But seriously, I think a lot of firms have already been working remotely, and we call it a virtual studio, because when I started Designaware, I was a student in London. So we didn't have a physical space or a studio as such. It was kind of in the cloud. So later on, when I moved to Hyderabad, we started a virtual studio in Dubai, where we just had, one architect. We didn't have a studio space or anything. And in fact, until recently, it remained virtual. Now we have a physical space and an address. But I think it's kind of the norm. There's a mix of physical and virtual, work happening, because
it'll be like
we
hybrid.
all tend to travel a lot. Yeah, it's a hybrid, exactly.
Yeah.
So because we're all anyway traveling a lot, we move around a lot. People are relocating from one place to the other. Last year we had a virtual studio in Riyadh, and now we don't anymore because that person has moved to Hyderabad. So we're already quite comfortable, and I think a lot of architects are already quite comfortable working this way, and I think it will continue.
All right, awesome. I just want to briefly talk about BIM. You've already implemented BIM in a way because you have the GAN project system, which is actually BIM 4D, which is time, and then we have even cost estimation, which is part of BIM. So BIM is not just the software, but being more efficient as a practice, as an industry, because we are a very unorganized sector, right? So how have you embraced technology to help you, become more efficient as a practice and working in the cloud, especially?
The one thing that I shared was Asana and obviously Dropbox and such things. But then, with BIM, I think being a very small firm, we don't have that many members working on a single project at the same time. I think that's software like, let's say Revit is more collaborative with, you can share the actual environment with many different agents and they can kind of plug into that. So that hasn't really happened that much yet because we do use Revit, but then the collaboration part of it, I think in the future, we'll definitely be looking at that because with Buildaware, what we're thinking of is that we will involve the other agencies, such as who are not part of Designware, such as, the engineering, kind of the engineers to collaborate with us in the form of BIM models. So instead of traditional drawings, I think we should be using these, models like building information models to collaborate rather than collaborating with using traditional ways, which are not as effective. So, of course, this will involve us educating them to use the technology as well. But I'm sure in the long term, it'll be more rewarding overall.
Yeah,
so that's one way that we're using technology, I think. Of course, that's collaborative. But then when it comes to design, obviously, there are so many computational tools that we're using, like Rhino and Grasshopper. So.
All right, nice. Yeah, I think the biggest hurdle I feel is because of the lack of skill set. So if I think now is a great time to upskill yourselves and hopefully more consultants and also these the contractors pick up on skills which will definitely be valuable going forward.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So, and you're also giving Skype sessions, not only in India, like you mentioned before. And it's a vague question, but has it been as effective as a face-to-face exchange of information?
I think when it comes to lectures, it doesn't make a difference. In fact, it's even better because it's easier to organize lectures and presentations with people sitting, across in another continent. So it saves time, effort, it saves money. Obviously, you don't have to pay for them to travel all the way. So it allows, I think, maybe this is an untapped thing because now we're forced to do it. So a lot of schools and colleges, we see them doing it. But this is something that I feel is really untapped potential because this can, allow a lot of international architects to come and speak at schools, which has not happened before, even though we had the technology. So I think that definitely should be done. We've been doing that since the last 10 years or so because we've been collaborating remotely and working and teaching as well. At the Design Research Lab, our tutors used to travel quite a lot. Sometimes one of them was in Tokyo and another in Madrid. So we were sitting in London and we were having remote reviews and crits via Skype. And and then later on, I've also taught workshops and attended juries, given lectures online via Skype. So the latest one was in Sept, where the jury actually happened over Skype. Like I joined over Skype.
Oh, nice.
So it's becoming the norm now. And I think the colleges really need to embrace this even after this entire quarantine time period is over, because then they can get more experts to collaborate with them or to lecture at their school. So I think maybe interactive workshops, which are physical, which involves a lot of fabrication, maybe physical modeling. Those maybe not so much, but there should be a combination. So as in where you can do something remotely or you can do something online, you should.
Yeah, and apart from Skype, there's also like various other platforms like Zoom, and I'm not sure.
Oh, yeah, Zoom is become big now. So yeah, I find it very. We tried it for a few of our virtual studio meetings. So yeah,
nice.
It's kind of effective.
All right, and coming from a perspective of the actual AEC industry and how it's been affected by the COVID situation, like how bad is it even for architects?
I think for architects, it's not really. I think it has a very minimal effect if you look at it in the greater, scheme of things, and from that perspective of how it's affecting all the other industries. Architects can work from anywhere, and we are kind of idea based. So this is, in fact, it's an opportunity to take a much needed pause from the stressful kind of working hours that we make up for ourselves. Negative studio culture. So we need to take a break from that, and it's time to reflect and read and sharpen the saw, like I said, by teaching or learning. But then projects, of course, do tend to slow down. From time to time, they do slow down because of various reasons. So it's not something unexpected. And if this is catching you off guard, then you need to look at the way that you have kind of set up your way of working, because most architects need to be used to this, and then it's very important to have a contingency plan in place for such unpredictable circumstances.
Yeah, you shouldn't be doing only projects, right? You should like venture out into even other things. Like you said, you're doing workshops and even academia.
Yeah. And also for the projects that are stalled, because of course projects are stalled, sites are no longer operational. So for that also we have, in our agreements with clients, we have a clause that talks about what we will do in times of a natural disaster. So this pandemic is almost like a natural disaster. And I think all architects, we need to become more business savvy and professional in this aspect, where we have our paperwork in place. So even in our contracts, we should have these clauses included, which address or talk about situations like not just natural disaster, but some sort of uprising or let's say harassment or intellectual property rights and such issues, because we have to think of all the possible issues that can arise in the duration of a project and how to deal with that. So it's important for professionals, even if they're not a firm, but they're just solopreneurs, let's say, or solo practitioners, they should have all this legal stuff in place. And because now as Buildaware, we are involved in construction management as well. For all our projects, we have contingency plan in place. So our project timelines, as well as the budget, have a buffer that allows for, unpredictable delays of some duration. And then delays, because delays can cost clients money. And it's our job as project managers to shield the client from loss. So we have these inbuilt margins that allow for some room to accommodate delays so that the project is not impacted negatively and it becomes expensive.
Right.
So, but apart from, I think our industry, the ones who are the most affected in our industry are the construction workers, especially the day laborers. So a lot of construction sites, they didn't close until very recently or until the lockdown was announced, which was very irresponsible of them. They should have closed maybe 10 days before that, which is luckily, we were in between stages of construction and there was no time sensitive work going on any of our sites. So we closed our sites last week or almost 10 days ago. So the workers had ample time to go back to their hometowns before the transport closed. So some of these workers, they don't have lodging. So some of them live on construction sites with their families for the duration of the project. So we need to, think of that beforehand. These things are, I think I would say we got kind of fortunate that India, was late in kind of being impacted.
Yeah, we're still at stage 2, I think.
So it's rapidly spreading. So I think and what we see now is that the workers are now kind of stranded. A lot of construction workers, a lot of day laborers are, of course, without pay. But the construction workers who didn't have any home who are just calling the site their home. They don't have a solution anymore, and they're actually we see them going on foot back to their hometowns, which is just unacceptable. So I think that as a professional fraternity, we have to somehow come together and make some arrangements to get them home or provide some alternatives so that they can, walking from the city to the village is just absurd. That's not in a developing country like ours, not in 2020 should this be happening. So it's hard to believe that there aren't any policies in place. But then right now is the time to kind of think on our feet and create solutions. I think Ethos is conducting some sort of online lectures.
Mm-hmm.
The fees, for which part of the fees will be going towards providing relief to the construction workers.
So that's great.
We're also thinking of certain initiatives which will help and contribute, because we have raised funds before through social media campaigning. So hopefully we'll be able to do that.
Yeah, definitely. These guys are the backbone of every structure that...
Exactly.
So we have to give them the due respect and whatever is needed. Yeah.
And policies should be in place that actually serve the lowest common denominator. Otherwise they're not really as effective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to branch out a bit, talking about project management. Yes, it is important for architects to start taking up turnkey projects, but a lot of people do complain about the stress and it being more of an obstacle since it comes in the way of your design as well. Do you feel that way?
Oh, totally. I agree with that. So it's because I think it's a choice. So what we do is, it's not really imperative that we take up every project that we get as a turnkey design and build project. But yeah, we take up selected projects where we feel we can do justice to it. We have to weigh the pros and cons, like we get greater control over the construction process or the execution, the finishing. And also we're able to make suggestions that will kind of better utilize the client's budget. So in that way, we gain more control over the process. So that gives us a little bit of peace of mind, rather than dealing with maybe another agency who's not under our control. So in a way, that really gives us that control and that peace of mind. But then on the other hand, it's quite stressful because the site doesn't stop for anyone. It has to, it keeps moving. So you have to be on top of things every day. For that, it really helps to have a team, of course. And at some point, you have to let, relinquish control and just let other people trust in them, and let them do the work. And so it really helps to have a rapport with the people that you're working with. So there has to be this good partnership where you recognize and you value their skill set, because as an architect, you can't have, in fact, jack of all trades and master of none is what an architect is, right?
Yeah, nowadays it's master of some, actually.
Yeah, you're right. But yeah, so you have to kind of stick to the things that you feel there's this thing that says only do what only you can do. Yeah. So everything else you outsource or you delegate, and you trust those people to carry forward their duties because they have the skills. And in fact, you should have people on your team who have skills which you don't have.
Yeah.
So that really adds value.
Yeah, but it definitely takes time to find those trustworthy people.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. So you've definitely been a big inspiration for a lot of us, and especially for women architects. I think I remember seeing one of your posts where you've seen more number of applications coming from women. So I know this is like a stereotypical question, but how important is it for women to take charge and be the face of the industry, if I may say so?
I think what I had mentioned earlier was that why we get a lot of applications from women. Some of them have shared it with me, and they've said that they find the atmosphere to be more comfortable, and there is less worry about being being seen as a woman. So because a lot of times there is gender discrimination and sexism in the workplace, where maybe some tasks are assigned to women because of their gender, or to men because of their gender. So like I said earlier, you may not be encouraged to go on site, and then you might see guys in the studio going on site. So that's maybe that is not so prominent, or it's not being done deliberately. I don't know, because it's so subtle that you don't really catch it.
Yeah.
But I think definitely there are certain things that are discriminatory towards women, and I think that workplaces need to become intentional about being inclusive and being, having an egalitarian kind of atmosphere. So until you're intentional about it, you will not create this kind of atmosphere. So at our studio, we have, we don't have many rules which are very rigid. We allow kind of flexibility, and we really value inclusiveness. So it's not just about gender, but all kinds of inclusiveness of all kinds of people and different backgrounds and skill sets. So the only rule that we have that is kind of, rigid and unchanging, that can't be compromised, is that you need to be respectful to fellow members and not discriminate, and be inclusive. So that's the kind of studio culture that we're trying to cultivate.
Nice.
So that's actually there in our set of rules that new, members have to sign. So, but I think it's the profession. I don't think it has a gender kind of aspect to it. That's why I don't really like to talk so much about gender, because I don't like the question, because the same question, men aren't being asked, how does gender impact? Because probably it doesn't for them. So when they're not asked questions about gender, I think women shouldn't either. So it all starts with, I think, changing the mindset and, awareness, of course. So once we raise awareness and we kind of examine ourselves and we kind of examine our practices, then only we can kind of change it. So personally, I don't think I've experienced any gender-based discrimination. So I'm only talking about what maybe I haven't noticed, because it's so subtle sometimes and it's ingrained. But I'm talking about what other women members or employees have shared with me. So
it's definitely a mindset problem, right?
Yeah. And it's like it's ingrained since childhood or something, I think, because of families or the media or, movies. So I think that's the whole atmosphere kind of needs to change. And I guess it's really important to talk about it. Then only we can, create real change. So a lot of people, experience this at home, or they don't experience it at home, and then they go to work and they experience it. That's when they're able to identify it. But sometimes it's so subtle that it's just ingrained in, and that's so raising awareness and having these conversations, really, that's what will help identify this discrimination.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then only we can.
We need a better, healthier work culture, and definitely in the architecture field, we need less working hours, which is happening right now, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Or, unfortunately, it can be the other way around as well, because we're sitting at home. It's easy to get lost in this, lose track of time. And then
that's true.
End up working 24/7, and all the days kind of meld into one another. So we need to be really aware of that and stop at 5 or 6 or whatever time you want to set for yourself. So it's easy to get carried away with a task. We know we pull all-nighters, right? So it's easy for us to get carried away that way. So I think that is something we need to intentionally avoid.
Yeah, I think that would be reduced if we have certain standards in place, or a set of methods, a system which would help in the running of the firm, right?
Yeah. So we do, actually, we have something called passion projects, which what we try to do is Monday to Friday, we work on regular projects, which are commission projects. And then on Saturdays, they're kind of open-ended. So for every member, they can pursue projects which they're really interested in.
Nice.
So that's what we call passion projects. So it's actually based on what Google used to have. I think they stopped it, but they used to have free time to pursue kind of personal projects, which would be more innovative because you're kind of self-initiating these ideas. So a lot of our interns and members are working on different things, which are at the end of their internship, they would have like a separate portfolio for that. And they would have something that is completed, that it was initiated by them.
Awesome. Yeah, I think you're like picking up a lot from these unicorn companies like Google. I mean, there's a lot to learn from them, but as architects, if we, like in Bangalore, we have the startup culture. So if we implement kind of a startup culture in architecture firms, we definitely come up with new innovations and ideas, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think every individual can identify as an entrepreneur now. I mean, you don't have to have a staff, you don't have to have a company. Yeah. It's just the way of being or the way of working. And these companies have shared so much of their internal kind of methods openly, so we were able to learn from that.
Yeah, definitely. This would come as a relief to most architecture students because they have this preconceived notion of low pay coming out of school. And but guys, there's a lot more you can do. So make use of your time, and once you're out, jump on those opportunities because they come only once, right?
Yeah, they need to think creatively, and I think a lot of students nowadays are doing that. Which is really nice to see.
All right, Takbir, there was a recent rule by the Supreme Court of India that stating that, unregistered individuals are not prohibited from practice of architecture, but they can't designate themselves as architects. I mean, that demeans ourselves. Yeah. We go through like 5 years of course for nothing, right?
Yeah, I mean, already it's a very informal kind of, loose set of rules for practicing architecture already. And this ruling, I think this is kind of, if there was no COVID-19, then this would be the thing that we would be discussing nonstop. Yeah. Because this is a very disturbing ruling that has just lit fire to the industry. Because our industry is like, can a person who's not a doctor treat patients or perform surgeries? They're not allowed to do that. And the judge, in fact, who passed the ruling, a non-judge can't pass judgments. So how can they, it's very contradictory because how can they say that a non-architect can practice architecture? Even though they're just not calling themselves architects. It's just, architecture is like, it's a very intensive and it's structured profession. It requires a lot of dedication, and it requires technical knowledge, understanding of, people's behavior, and 5 years is probably just scratching the surface of architecture, right? You're not really learning anything in 5 years. That's just the beginning. An introduction to architecture is what that should be called. Because later on, I mean, even in practice, it's very intensive. And also these new technologies that are coming up, that means you have to keep sharpening the saw and reinventing yourself and learning. So in other countries, you have to have a lot of experience before you can actually become a licensed architect. You have to have certain number of dedicated.
It's actually a struggle to become an architect overseas and get the license.
Yeah. And you have to write these exams.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's very difficult to pass them. So here, it was relatively much easier with the licensing by the Council of Architecture. So the terms were much, much easier compared to anywhere else in the world, I would say. And now even that has been taken away. It made it much more easier for a non-architect, or it could be, and anybody who's not even professional practicing architecture, and that devalues the profession as a whole.
Yeah.
But even more seriously than that is that it will put people's lives at risk. Because if a non-architect comes in and they're making structural changes to existing buildings, or they are, what's next? Maybe we don't require structural engineers anymore, and then they are designing the structure. So it's not going to, where does it stop? So in fact, I feel that the path to licensing, it should have been more regulated and strict.
Yeah,
But
absolutely. Yeah.
in fact, even interior designers should have a license by, probably a separate council that determines who can practice interior design as well.
Yeah, interior design is like the biggest money-making field now, right?
Yeah. So I think for that, the least they can do is regulate it. Actually, there's a petition being signed by architects. I think you should put the link in so that people can sign that petition to appeal the Supreme Court ruling.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think all listeners should sign this petition so that we can save the profession.
Yeah, instead of going forward as a profession, we're going way, way back.
Yeah, it's very disturbing.
Yeah, coming towards the end, these are tough times, but we'll definitely overcome and definitely come out smarter by the end. But what message or advice would you give to architects and architecture students right now?
Right now, during this quarantine period, I think there's a global pandemic going on. So none of us know what's going to happen next. So if you feel depressed or worried or you're panicking, that's pretty normal. And if you feel unproductive, that's okay as well, because these are serious times. But at the same time, I feel, this is a really good opportunity, because from constraints comes creativity, right? So this is kind of a constraint that has been put on us, that we're restricted in certain ways. So now I feel is a really good time to do all the things that you've been putting on hold. Either, you want to tool up and learn something new and gain some skills for your resume, or, work on some competitions that will augment your portfolio, or you could just, work on passion projects, which you didn't have the time to do before. Also, you can, just read and reflect and think, because you actually need some, alone time or empty, periods of time. That's where creativity actually is born, because that's where you get all your ideas. If you keep yourself too busy, then you may not be able to think of something new. So I think it's a time of reflection, and I prefer to think that the whole world has been put on pause for you. So what are you going to do with this time? At the same time, my advice is please don't watch too much news, because that will just take a toll on you.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. Now's the best time, instead of getting worried or worked up too much, it's best to invest in yourself and learn something.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I'm sure you had a lot of plans for 2020. Some of it must be stifled to a certain extent, but how is this epidemic changed your goals or plans which you had going forward?
Yeah, so a lot of travel plans obviously have been impacted, and then there were some speaking engagements and certain workshops that had to be put on hold. Some of the workshops which we're planning for May are still on, so we will still be having the Fractals workshop in May. But apart from that, I always have a really long, never-ending to-do list. So all the things that I can't do right now, I just have to go further down the list, and there are other things to do. So remote learning is one of the things that we are going to start now, with more, putting more effort towards that. Apart from that, I think everything else is pretty much on track. It's just that certain things which have been impacted, I think it's for the best, because we might be able to come up with new ideas in this time. So, yeah.
All right. Awesome. And before I let you go, I'll just quickly jump to the quickfire round, and we'll ask you a couple of brief questions and have brief answers. Which book have you been reading lately, or which book has inspired you a lot as an architect?
Well, right now I'm reading this Everything is Figured Out, a book by Marie Forleo. So that's really kind of, it's more about work. So it's kind of it's a fun read, but it's also very useful. I think for me, Yes is More is the one that I found the most inspiring, if you want to talk about an architecture book. Because it's in the title, it tells you to say yes to everything.
Yeah.
So that was very inspiring towards the beginning. But now I feel our philosophy is more like no is more, because, no is better, because it's now we need to pick and choose what we want to do rather than, taking up everything and getting stressed out by it. So yes, definitely saying yes opens up more opportunities, but sometimes saying no also gives you more high quality opportunities.
All right. What music are you listening to right now? Or what do you generally listen to?
Generally, I'm not a very, I don't really listen to too much of music. But then, yeah, I think I'm still stuck with the old Linkin Park and
oh, nice.
Similar kind on,
right.
Just on shuffle. Kind of makes you feel like working, I feel, at least for me, especially when you're doing some 3D modeling. So.
Yeah, but I tend to listen to more of EDM because lyrics tend to take you astray a bit. So, but yeah, it's great to know that you listen to Linkin Park. That's awesome. All right. What would you have chosen had you not taken up architecture?
I don't think I would do anything else. There's nothing else that I'd rather do. I almost got into computer engineering, but later I came to know that architecture kind of encompasses any field. You can kind of get into any field from architecture. So that's the great thing about architecture.
Yeah, but apart from medicine, any other field, I guess.
Yeah, you're right. Who knows what the Supreme Court will say next.
All right. As architects, especially during college, we watch a lot of movies and series as well. So which one would you consider your favorite?
I think from the beginning, like from childhood, my favorite movie was The Shawshank Redemption.
Oh, nice.
Recently, I really love Parasite. Everybody's crazy about it.
Parasite was mad. Yeah, I got the chance to watch it as well.
Yeah. And this is probably the only movie other than Shawshank that I've watched more than once. So I went and watched it twice. Because
nice.
I love the architecture.
Exactly.
And,
it plays a big role in the movie, right?
Yes. The urban planning as well, right? I can relate to so many of those things because unfortunately, our studio is in a low-lying area of the city. It's not very well planned, and it gets flooded in heavy monsoon.
Right. Okay.
So we can actually, I could relate to the scene where the water is coming in and she's just sitting there helpless and smoking. So
yeah, I thought it's the other way around, where you're sitting in that fancy house and working away.
No, our studio gets flooded. Like if there's very heavy rain, then that part of the city. So this is a big fail in terms of city planning. Which we are actually working with. We are working towards getting the government to address that, the municipal corporation.
Yeah, I think, I wanted to discuss this a bit as well, but maybe you could tell us more about how, as a firm, you ventured into urban planning as well, right?
Not really urban planning, but more of urban design. And I think it just comes under urbanism, you would say. So as an architect, I think, like I said, it encompasses everything. So you can kind of get into, you can shrink your scope of work, or you can expand it. So we chose to expand it. We can get into different disciplines. So recently we've been doing a lot of installations and certain, urban level interventions.
Nice.
We're also working on certain designs of parks and parklets for the city. So that's, I think, obviously the expertise that we lack, we will be taking on partners to help us with that and, get some mentors to guide us with that. But I think it's really important for architects to get involved in government projects as well, because we should not be limited to kind of reaching the elite few or reaching, private companies or private homeowners, but it should be more about improving the city, right? If you are really interested in making a greater impact, then that path is open to you. So you can kind of take up projects which have more of an urban impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Like a lot of companies, they try to help the government through the CSR or corporate social responsibility. So I think even architects in a way, could keep some amount of time.
I think because the government is anyway offering paid, like projects.
Right.
They might be much less and the pay might be delayed or whatever, but still, as long as you're compensated, I'm not saying that we should all work for free or work for less.
Yeah.
But a kind of part of your time can be devoted to that. It all depends on what matters to you. What are your priorities and goals? So if you have goals which actually say that you want to make an impact on the city and you want to change certain things, then you have that option open to you. So
yeah, and I hope more government buildings are designed by architects, because most buildings are done by contractors.
They used to be.
Yeah,
they used to be designed. I mean, Le Corbusier.
All right. Now, of course, your daily routine is different, but what was your daily routine like previous to all this COVID and Corona?
I used to have a routine.
All right.
So I think now it's become a little more, I'm able to do other things that I want to. But yeah, previously it was just more work oriented rather than, but then at the studio itself, like I said, there are different seasons for different things. So we have different days on which we do different things. So we used to do that. So I used to divide my time in terms of, say, administrative work, or in fact, one day a week would be just me time and alone time. So I was calling it the alone zone, where, you just close the door and sit. I mean, I have the privilege of doing that. So, I think there were different tasks that had to be divided into different days. And then, of course, site visits. So a lot of site visits, and then sharing that on social media, because we like to involve many people and share what we're doing with them. So yeah, a good amount of time was devoted to social media as well. I would like to do much more, devote much more time to design. I wish. I'm sure all architects would like to do that. But yeah, running a firm means that you have to do other things as well. But now I think, because this quarantine is, if I see it as an opportunity, I'm getting more time to read and cook and, do other things, like do my passion projects, which are like drawing, artwork and writing, things like that.
All right.
But I think the main thing is just looking out